Hello, world history students. Time to start our last unit for the year, Unit 11, on the Great War. You don't normally think of war as being great, and so we're not saying great like good, like, man, that was a great sandwich, but great like really, really big, like the Great Canyon, which I'm sure you've heard of. Now, the Great War is oftentimes referred to as World War One, but they didn't know it was World War One when it happened. So they tried to come up with a huge name, a name more like any others. Think of all the names of wars we've talked about. 30 Years' War, French and Indian War, War of Austrian Succession, Opium War, wars that had causes and names and timelines. Well, this war was so big and so different and so catastrophic that they didn't have a name for it. They couldn't figure out, what do we call it? And so what they called it, to try and help everyone understand the scale, was the Great War. And it was a big deal. And when you look at the causes of World War II, for the most part, it's going to be World War I. So let's start to break down the first part of this. What were the long and short-term causes of the Great War? Okay, so in your outline on 11.1, it should look about like this, is how you're going to want to break this down. Okay, so we're going to do 4 long-term causes, 1 short-term cause, and then we're going to talk about the domino effect. Okay, so leave that amount of space kind of for your outline. Now, one other thing, you notice at the top, we've got this little acronym, MANIA. Notice there's 4 capital letters and 1 lowercase letter. It's a real easy way to remember the causes of World War I. And so we're going to talk about militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and then a little letter A we'll talk about later. Now, we're going to go over them in this order here, A, B, C, D, because it makes more sense to learn it kind of chronologically. But in terms of memorizing what the 4 long-term causes are, just remember this word, mania. Okay, so let's move into it. So the first long-term cause of the Great War was the rise of imperialism. Okay, so we just did this unit, talked about how all these countries were reaching to get bigger empires around the globe. The British, the sun never sets on the British Empire, and they're grabbing for land in Africa and grabbing land in Asia, and they're even grabbing land in Europe in this little area down here called the Balkans. The Balkans are where you see countries like Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Macedonia. And so there's all these little countries that Europe, Austria-Hungary's been grabbing them, Russia's been trying to assert itself, Italy's trying to assert itself. And so basically, a few European countries have been expanding their empires around the world and grabbing as much as they can. Well, one of the problems with that is you start bumping into people, and maybe you might want to fight over what land you're going to grab, like 2 people trying to grab the same candy bar. Dibs doesn't work on a global level. And so these countries, as their empires are getting bigger and bigger, they're kind of bumping into each other. They're seeing themselves as in a competition, in a race, and you don't want to lose the race. So imperialism is what really kind of gets this downward slope to World War I started, as everyone's grabbing more and more colonies. Because in order to grab colonies, you need a big, strong military. In order to protect colonies, you need a big, strong military. And look what's the difference in spending here. Look at this graph, very simple. Open your eyes, close your eyes. You see gray and blue. And what do you initially notice? A lot more blue, especially as time goes on. We'll notice the dates. The gray is 1890. So this is, kind of early mid imperialism. This is 1914, towards the end of imperialism. 1914 is the beginning of World War I. And look at these European countries, Russia, Germany, Great Britain, and France. And look at how much money they have started spending on their military. They've got these huge militaries, marching, parading, and in addition, they've all gone through the Industrial Revolution. So these militaries have much more advanced weaponry and lots more of it. And so you've got countries spreading around the globe and militaries growing almost out of control, almost like an arms race. Well, if you're really, really big and strong and you're bumping into people in the hallway, you're a little more likely to fight because you've got all this strength. If you're small and tiny and you bump into somebody in the hallway, you kind of say, excuse me, and keep moving. Well, all of this militarism is causing Europe to get kind of a big ego. Maybe the best example of that is Germany. You know, look at their helmets. Their helmets have spikes on them. There's no practical purpose for spiky helmets. That's just, it's, you know, for better or for worse, it's kind of the middle finger to the rest of the world, basically saying, look how big and strong we are. Now go back in history. Who are the great-grandfathers of the German people? Well, Prussians. And what do we talk about for Prussia? Always willing to fight, always strong. They also industrialized pretty heavily. They won the first industrial war when they defeated France in the Franco-Prussian War. And there was a German general who came up with what he called the von Schlieffen plan. Notice the double F's in Schlieffen. So when you see von Schlieffen, think fight France first. Lots of F's. Notice the issue that Germany has. Germany is concerned that they're surrounded by France and Russia, who are buddies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But because they're buddies with each other, Germany realizes they're going to have to fight them both. And so von Schlieffen said, well, we'll just slide right through Belgium, knock France out, and then we could turn our attention to Russia. Paris for lunch, St. Petersburg for dinner. That's very, very arrogant militarism. And the reason that's so is because their army was huge. It was strong. It was powerful. It was industrialized. And the Germans were ready to pick a fight with just about anybody. They also referred to this as their Anschluss. They're taking back land that had always belonged to them. Okay. Now, if you've got a bunch of countries getting really, really big and strong, and their militaries are getting big and strong, you start to get nervous. And when you get nervous, you make friends. You make treaties. And there's two treaties that we really want to focus on. The first treaty is the Triple Alliance. Triple Alliance is the reddish color here. Okay, they're the countries, they also refer to them as here's the other nickname, Central Powers. So the Triple Alliance is the Central Powers. Now, the only two countries you need to focus on now are Germany and Austria-Hungary. Now, they say Austria-Hungary, but it's really just Austria. Hungary was kind of got beat up and got all their milk money taken from them. Don't worry about Bulgaria, small little deal. And the Turks joined later, basically because nobody likes the Turks, and so they realized that the Germans and the Austrians are the bad guys, so the Turks jumped in on their team. So you have one team, the Triple Alliance, the Central Powers. Now we have our second team, the Triple Entente, E-N-T-E-N-T-E. It's a French term, basically means friendly. And by Triple Entente, friendly, these are the allies, Great Britain, France, and Russia. Those are the only three you really need to focus on. Italy joins kind of late, kind of like realizing that they wanted to be on the winning team. They don't really offer much. It's the focus on the Triple Alliance, the Triple Entente is Great Britain, France, and Russia. Now, why do you make treaties like this? Well, you're watching your neighbor's military get big and strong. And, you know, Germany thinks, oh, I know I can knock out France, but I don't know if I can knock out France and Russia. You know, here you got little Serbia down here at the bottom, and they're nervous because Austria-Hungary is trying to imperialize them. So they look to their big brother Russia to make an alliance. And then you've got Austria-Hungary, who's kind of right next door to Russia, a little scared of them, so you make an alliance with Germany. You got little Belgium here who's scared of Germany, and they are worried about Germany's big military, so they make an alliance with England. And these alliances become almost like a cobweb. And if you pull one string on a cobweb, a spider's web, then the whole thing moves. And so you've got alliances across Europe. Last but not least, you have two types of nationalism. The first nationalism you have is from the big countries, the Great Britons, the Germanys, the Russias, which is basically, we're big and strong, nobody can knock us down. I mean, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Come on, don't spoil a good fight. They're calling a war a good fight. Look at the German view of their soldiers, this big, strong man fighting for the fatherland, okay? And so all of these big countries started to see themselves as bigger and stronger than they were, as more powerful, as more right. You know, if I go into a war with somebody, well, you know, somebody might accuse me of being a bully, of being belligerent. But this kind of nationalism just kind of proved to all of them that they were on the right side. And that's a bad, bad way to think about it when you realize that you're growing and heading towards war, that you can't be wrong. The second type of nationalism was all the little countries like the countries in the Balkans. This map, very confusing, but what it's supposed to show you is all the different ethnic and religious groups that comprised this area. And they've all been shoved into one, you know, sort of big country here, and they really belong in little smaller countries. People refer to this as pan-Slavism. These people are Slavs. Yugoslavia, okay, is a nickname. Czechoslovakia. And it's a group. And Russia is also known as Slavic people. They're Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Church. Remember that from way back when we had the Great Schism. And so this area, because it was so volatile and so many different groups, they started to refer to it as the powder keg of Europe. And this kind of powder is like gunpowder. So if you have a big barrel of gunpowder, it'll cause a big explosion. Look here, you can see some of the European countries trying to keep a lid on the Balkan troubles, right? These countries have their own nationalism. It's very similar to the nationalism that the 13 colonies had before the American Revolution. This script that you see here is from a particular nationalistic group called the Black Hand, which was a Serbian group that wanted to be independent. They wanted Austria out. So there you have the four long-term causes. Think of them as logs on a fire. And it's a perfectly set fire. Right logs, the right conditions. But there's no fire there because there's no match. The match is the short-term cause, the little a assassination. So it's amazing to think that this person right here, this young boy, 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian in the Black Hand, could be given credit for starting the Great War. One little kid in a country you could barely find on a map. Because he assassinated, you can see the image here, the Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife as they were driving through Sarajevo in Serbia. He was part of the Black Hand and he wanted independence, and one of the ways they thought they could give their nationalism and their freedom was to attack the Austrians who were trying to control them. So earlier in the day they were driving and a grenade was thrown at the car and it didn't blow up. And Francis Ferdinand was kind of arrogant and said, they'll never get me. And so they ended up coming down the street where Gavrilo was, and Gavrilo pulled out a pistol and shot and killed the Archduke and his wife. Well, the Archduke was second in command of Austria. You can't assassinate somebody second in command without a reprisal, which leads us to the domino effect. Okay, now the domino effect, here, I'm going to show you an image, so give me just a second here. So Serbia is now issued an ultimatum by the Austrians who basically say, do all of these things, and if you don't do them, we're going to declare war on you. Well, pretty quickly they declare war on them, which leads to what we call the domino effect. So here's an image where you can basically see Serbia being hit by Austria. So big brother Russia comes to their aid. Well, when Russia attacks Austria, Germany has to join because of their alliance. And here comes France running because they have an alliance with Russia. So up here you can read it. And you're going to want to write this out and make sure that you have this. You could do it as an image. You could even draw little dominoes if you wanted to, or little stick figures. But make sure you understand the order. So Austria-Hungary delivers the ultimatum. Serbia refuses, so Austria-Hungary declares war. Russia attacks Austria. Germany declares war on Russia. France declares war on Germany. Now here's the trick. What country do we not have involved yet? Well, we don't have England in yet. Well, England basically tries to get out of it by telling France, our treaty was with you is if you got attacked. If somebody jumped on you, we'd help you. Well, look, you declared war on Germany. You started the fight, so we're not obligated to help you just yet. Well, remember the von Schlieffen plan? Germany invades Belgium to sneak through Belgium to get into France. Well, when that happens, guess what? Great Britain has an alliance with Belgium, and now they have to join the war. And so that's the final deal. And now you've got a world war. Now, why is it a world war? Well, because of all the imperialism. Remember, they've got colonies in Africa and Latin America and Asia. So you got a German colony in Africa and a French colony in Africa. There's going to be troops there. Those troops are going to fight each other. And so that's the domino effect. And so the war is going to spread very quickly. Notice you can see Germany going through Belgium. You know, this is the little Belgian kid trying to stand up to Germany. It doesn't go well. There's some pretty bad stuff that happened between Germany and the Belgians. This is an image of some citizens just being executed by German troops. And so as a result of that, the war has now begun. Now, there are three interesting looks you could research and look up. You can, just Google the title of each of these. How World War I started, crash course, what caused the First World War, and the four main causes of World War. It's interesting. Watch at least two of these. They're almost identical. The arguments for what caused the Great War are always going to fall upon mania. So use that to get through your first in units 11, 11.1.